Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
Not exactly the Feast of Tabernacles, but we're still here at the Ark. We should be back, but the barn unforeseen, all fully operational back in Irving next week. But anyway, what I'm going to do today is not really a real sermon per se, but more of a, we're most likely going to come across as a study, I would suppose. And I'm going to finish up what I started on King Asa, Judah. Now there's two parallel accounts of the king. One is in 2 Chronicles 14, 15, and 16, and the other is in 1 Kings 15, but we will be using the accounts from 2 Chronicles, this being a bit more complete. Because what we get out of the account from 1 Kings is pretty much Reader's Digest. It says very little that's not in accounts, Chronicles, plus one of the Chronicles is a bit more detailed. So open up, we're going to start out, let's see, we left off in 2 Chronicles 16. So actually what we see here with King Asa, he started out very good. Israel had its usual pattern. They've had good kings, bad kings. He came out of a string of a couple of bad kings, and then King Asa appears on the scene, and he starts out very well. And in the first part of this study, actually in chapters 14 and 15, we focus mostly on him as a parallel, as a type of Joshua. But when we hit and enter chapter 16, that kind of comes to an end. But there's just some very valuable lessons to be learned here as we'll go through this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, it's a pretty short chapter, I'm going to go ahead and just read through it, and then we'll come back and we'll address any question or commentary we have to, because I do have I do got some material here on this to help cover this somewhat. 2 Chronicles 16, verse 1. In the 36th year of the reign of King Asa, Baasha, king of Israel, came up against Judah and built Ramah, that he might let none go out or come in to Asa, king of Judah. And then Asa brought silver and gold from the treasury to the house of Yahweh and the king's house. So he stripped both the temple and his own house to pay off Ben-Hadad. And he sent to Ben-Hadad, the king of Syria, who dwelt in Damascus, saying, now let there be a treaty between you and me, as there was between your father and my father. See, I sent you silver and gold. Come, break your treaty with Baasha, king of Israel, so that he will withdraw from me. So Ben-Hadad heeded King Asa, and he sent the captains of his armies against the cities of Israel. They attacked, boy, it's hard to get John, Dan, Ebal-Maim, and all the storage cities of Naphtali. Now it happened when Baasha heard it, and he stopped building Ramah and ceased his work. And King Asa took all Judah, and they carried away those stones and timber of Ramah, which Baasha had used for the building. And he built Geba and Mizpah. And at that time, Hananiah, the seer, or prophet, came to Asa, king of Judah, and he said to him, well, because you've relied on the king of Assyria, and you have not relied on Yahweh your Elohim, therefore the army of the king of Assyria has escaped your hand. Were the Ethiopians and the Levine not a huge army with very many chariots and horsemen? You got to remember, back in verse 14, we covered this in the previous study. In verse 14, not verse 14, chapter 14. In chapter 14, they had over 1 million men between them. Yet because you relied on Yahweh, he delivered them into your hand. But he had 300 some odd thousand versus well over 1 million. And there was really not much fighting for them per se. Because all was left for them, remember, it was Yahweh that defeated this army. And all was left for them to do was plunder, plunder and spoil. The army had to do little, his own army had to do little to no fighting. For the eyes of Yahweh run to and fro throughout the whole earth. Canaanite continuing to show himself strong on behalf of those whose heart is loyal to him. In this, but in this, you have done foolishly. Therefore, from now you shall have wars. And then Esau was angry with the seer and put him in prison, for he was enraged at him because of this. And Esau oppressed some of the people at the same time. Now note that the acts of Esau, the first and the last, are indeed written in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel. In the 39th year of his reign, Esau became diseased in his feet, and his malady was severe, and yet in his disease he did not seek Yahweh, but he sought the physicians. So Esau rested with his father, and he died in the 41st year of his reign. They buried him even in his own tomb, which he had made for himself in the city of David. And they laid him in the bed, which was filled with spices and various ingredients, prepared with a mixture of ointment. And they made a very great burning for him. Now, I found that strange whenever they made a burning for him. What they do, they wrap. It kind of made me wonder what they did. Of course, I don't have enough connection to look that up, but anyway, I got some thoughts. I got some notes here on this. But let me ask a question. Anyone else have any thoughts or questions concerning this passage? We're open to them. All you got to do is get your hand up. I'll call on you. Doesn't matter who you are. Even the little ones can do that.
There you go.
Even the little ones can have a question. But I'm going to warn you about the little ones. I remember one time, a few years ago, last time I laid down this dare, one of the little ones did lay down a question. And it wasn't anything ludicrous, ridiculous, but it was something a little one would ask. He stumped virtually the whole room.
Yeah.
They're experts at that. I don't know how they do that. Yes, Dad, way in the back?
I noticed that also brought out silver and gold of the treasures of the house of the Lord. So it just wasn't the gold that was, in the country's treasuries.
Right.
But this might have been out of the temple, their temple.
Well,
the
most
house
likely
of
it was.
God. So he was really, not only was he giving away treasure, giving away what's already been given to the Lord.
And from his own house. So he stripped some of the finery of his own house as well. The idea seems to be that it was to buy off Ben-Hadad, break his treaty. Why should I break my treaty with Ben-Hadad? To save you. Oh, that's why. A wagon load of goodies.
Yeah.
Fistful of dollars. Wagon full of gold and silver. Now we're talking. Okay, yeah, I think I can do that. Anyone else? That's a good observation. First, can y'all hear me in the back? Okay, good. Because up to this point here, up to chapter 16, King Asa had done so well. But he seems to fall short here. And he has a pretty rapid descent. Let us turn, because I think I know, I may have an answer for that question of what happened. What was it that happened with him? Why would he just turn about so face? Because when he relied on Yahweh, he'd done so well. He defeated an army over 1 million men. He had peace on his borders. He defeats the army. All the army has to do is plunder the goods. Don't even have to fight. Whereas here now he's going to have wars. He's going to have nothing but trouble. Let's try Luke for an explanation. Help give us an answer to verses 2 and 3. Let's turn to Luke 28. Let's turn to Luke 14, please. We'll drop down to verses 28 and 30. Luke 14. Hold your place in 2 Chronicles, by the way. Luke 14, let's drop down to verse 28. For which of you, intending to build a tower, does not sit down first to count the cost, whether he has enough to finish it? That's after all, after he's laid his foundation, he is not able to finish it. And those who see it begin to mock him and say, well, this guy over here, look at that. He began to build, he was not able to finish. Or what king? Going to war. Is going to make war against another king, does not sit down and first consider whether he is able to, with 10,000 to meet him, and who comes against him with 20,000. Or else, while there is still a great distance away off, sends a delegation and asks for conditions of peace. Likewise, whichever of you does not forsake all that he has cannot be my disciple. I think we got a little hint here, because first off, in terms of a king sitting down to meet an army and counting his cost, this fits the saw very well, doesn't it? Got some heads nodding. Yeah, this sounds just like what we read out of 2 Chronicles of the Psalm. Now, what other lesson can we count here? Remember, he could not count his cost.
Coach.
Yes, David.
Yeah, this reminds me of the times in Scripture when any of the kings or anyone would do something without asking Yahweh first.
Well, now you're getting somewhere.
Yeah.
You're getting to the heart of the matter.
The ones that were considered good kings and would ask Yahweh before they did anything, but the ones that would not, seek the prophets or seek Yahweh's word before doing a matter, it always fell short, or it did not actually get accomplished in the way that they wanted it. So I would say here, counting our costs before we do something is basically just seeking Yahweh to tell us which way to go and whatever we choose to do, letting Him guide us instead of us trying to guide ourselves, which obviously if we think we know anything, we know nothing, that we cannot guide ourselves.
I had all those physical buildings intact. Remember, the temple was all laid out with gold like it was supposed to be. He had his house all fancied up like the king's house was supposed to be. But what about his spiritual house? What about his heart? What about the house of his heart, his mind, his soul? Giving everything unto Yah, like we read of in Deuteronomy 6. I don't read that anywhere in this account. Let's continue this. Does anyone recall reading in the account of Asa in 2 Chronicles of him, that he gave his whole heart and his whole mind into serving Yahweh? That is not written.
Correct.
That is not written. And I found that very strange. It was only after I got to the end of the account, reading all this. I didn't have to read it over all more than once. To see that was not written anywhere. We find that written a couple of times about David, correct? In spite of all his flaws and all his imperfections, we see that written about King Josiah. We find that written about Hezekiah, but nowhere about Asa. Even Manasseh did, after his release from a Babylonian prison. Manasseh repented to the point that he was released from a Babylonian prison, given his throne back. Nonetheless, that is not written anywhere about Asa, and I found that kind of sad, found that kind of interesting. Because on one, it would seem like, yeah, he knew to do these things, but was his heart really in it? Or did he learn? Or he started out, remember, he started well. The more reasonable explanation could be he started out that way, but he never developed that heart, that wholeheartedness. He never did that spiritual bodybuilding, if you will. he didn't finish that proverbial house. The physical house was all said and done, but the spiritual house was, well, he started out, he got his foundation and all that laid down, just like we did reading Messiah's parable. But we don't see the fruits of him building up the rest of his house. David, did you have something?
Yeah, I was going to say, I liken this to kind of our walk. In the beginning, a lot of us are really, really on fire about what we learn and the truth and learning more and following Yahweh's will. But once we receive opposition to the things that we're trying to do and change in our life, do we continue on and persevere through that opposition? If I look at King Ahaz, maybe he started to get pushback from his constituents that all of these things that you're changing, we're not with it. And so he allowed them to have certain things like the groves. He didn't destroy all of them or something. And that is what was actually his downfall. Do we do that in our lives today? Do we let people basically persuade us to not go wholeheartedly all the way towards Yahweh, and we kind of hold back, and we're kind of in the old world and we're trying to develop this new world that is our life? If we don't go wholeheartedly everything we've got into Yahweh's word and his will, are we falling short by doing so? And I think we are. And he fell short because he did that.
Tom.
You see this deal that was cut here in chapter 16, that here's a king. I saw 36 years reigning, and yet we read in verse 1 of 2 Chronicles 16 that there was this pushback with this Baasha, king of Israel, coming in conflict with Asa's kingdom and built Ramah to the intent that he might let none go out or come into Asa, the king of Judah. It was like in lockdown. So here we have this king, Asa, bring out silver and gold and treasure to the house of Yahweh, as we heard earlier, and the king's house, and sent to Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, that dwelt in Damascus. And here it is, verse 3. There is a league, or contract, or a covenant between me and you, as there was between my father and your father. Behold, I have sent you silver and gold. Go, break your league with Baasha, king of Israel, that he may depart from me. We read a little bit further before the seer gives such a severe warning to Asa that he had all these victories heretofore in the past. But wait, we go back here and see what's happened with Asa. He's forgotten Torah. Because in the 7th chapter of the book of Deuteronomy, it says, when Yahweh your Elohim shall bring you into the land where you go to possess it, and has cast out many nations before you. We were just reading earlier that he was behind the victories that Asa had with his kingdom armies. And he mentions the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Haggai years ago, that was very irrelevant. He said, the one people that were left out, Tom, were the termites. I said, they were not involved. 7 nations greater than you are. But notice verse 2, and when Yahweh your Elohim shall deliver them before you, you shall smite them and utterly destroy them. Here it is. You shall make no treaty, or here it says covenant with them, nor show mercy unto them. And the marriages that would be convenient are warning it. This was in direct rebellion, violation on the part of King Asa. Before there's this very strong admonition from the seer. In that era there were individuals called seers that would tell more about what was going on contemporaneous to the moment than so much like a prophet who would be speaking far into the future. All seers could bring forth prophetic utterance that gave understanding of the times, and he's doing this and talking about the astounding telemetry that Asa has forgotten somehow. It was the Creator that backed up and enabled his armies to prevail. And it's saying in verse 9, his eyes run to and fro throughout the whole earth. I mean, there's geosynchronous satellites in outer space that can take the name off a basketball in a photograph, or even smaller. But that's tinker toys, that's Legos compared to what is being described by Yahweh's eyes that scan the whole planet and whose heart it says is complete or perfect towards him. But he says, here it is, herein you have done foolishly. Therefore from here on out, from henceforth, you shall have war. What an inappropriate response rather than being humble and acknowledging the correction. He throws Hananiah the seer in prison and even mistreats or attacks other people in the land. It said it wasn't enough to throw him in prison. In the rage he had of this thing, he even oppressed other people at the same time. Well, we'll read here in a moment as you were continuing on that. Just what are the tragic consequences of someone who had it all going for them and they just went into cruise control or just believed it was all in his power to do whatever he bloody well pleases, say in Britain.
Okay, let's try. What was one of the, in this account? What we read is a direct violation of Torah on the account of King Asad. Let's turn to Exodus 23, please. Exodus 23. And we'll pick it up in verse 32. Actually, let me back up a little bit. We're not going to go to 32. We'll get a little bit of context, but I actually find it quite fitting. Let's back up to 27, please. We'll read verses, Exodus 23. We'll read verses 27 through the end of the chapter because I find it quite fitting here. I will send my fear before you, and I will cause confusion amongst all the people to whom you come, and I will make all your enemies turn and run their backs to you. Well, we read that. We saw that happen with Gideon, didn't we? And his 300 against the army they faced. And we read that previously in 2 Chronicles 14 with Asa and the Ethiopians. And I will send hornets before you, which will drive out the Hivite, the Canaanite, and the Hittite before you. And I will drive them out before you in 1 year, lest the land become desolate and the beasts of the field become too numerous for you. That's right, we don't want wild animals moving in. And little by little, I will drive them out before you until you have increased and you inherit the land. I will set your bounds from the Red Sea to the sea, Philistia from the desert to the river, meaning the Euphrates. And I will deliver the inhabitants of the land into your hand. I will drive them out before you. And you shall make no covenant with them or with their gods.
Yes.
That's exactly where Saul fell down here. Evidently he forgot this point. They shall not dwell in your land. Lest they make you sin against me. Or if you serve their gods, it will surely be a snare to you. A few pages over remaining in Exodus, we get a similar admonition. In Exodus 34. Let's pick it up in verse 10. And he said, behold, I make a covenant. Before all your people I will do marvels, such as not been done in all the earth, nor in any nation. And all the people among whom you are shall see the work of Yahweh, for it is an awesome thing that I will do for you. Behold, observe what I commanded you this day. And behold, I am driving out before you the Amorite, the Canaanite, and the Hittite, the the Pezrite, the Hivite, the Jebusite. And take heed for yourselves, lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land where I am going, lest it be a snare in your midst. Here we go. That's his treaty with Asai, Ben-Hadad. But you shall destroy their altars, and break their sacred pillars, and cut down all their wooden images. For you shall worship no other being, for Yahweh, whose name is jealous, and he is the jealous Elohim. Lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, and they play the harlot with their gods, and make sacrifice to their gods, and one of them invites you to eat of all this sacrifice. Take your daughters for their daughters, and play the harlot with their gods, and make your sons play the harlot with theirs. So, we got the Syrian king who engaged in every bit of this. And here he is, we have Asaph, of whom Yahweh at first had done lots of marvelous wonders for. Yet we find him going backwards in his ways. Anyone else have any thoughts or questions, comment either on this or any other part of the passage? And evidently, there's a lesson to be learned regarding the seer here. We'll get into it. I think that'll help provide some explanation as well. And let's fast forward a little bit. Let's go to verse 7 remaining in 2 Chronicles 16. Now at that time, Hananiah the seer came to Asaph, the king of Judah, and he said, because you've relied on the king of Syria, and you have not relied on Yahweh your Elohim, and therefore the army of the king of Syria has escaped from your hand. Were the Ethiopians, the Lubim, not such a huge, were they not a huge army with many chariots and horsemen? Hold our place here. Let's get a reminder of how big this army was. Can we go back to chapter 14 momentarily?
Right.
Let's just get a reminder of how big this army was. Let's keep our 2 Chronicles 14, verse 8. So I had an army of 300,000 from Judah who carried the shields and spears, and from Benjamin who carried 280,000 men who carried shields and drew bows. And these were all mighty men of valor. Then Zariah the Ethiopian came out and against him with an army of 1 million men and 300 chariots. And he came to Marishah. So he had an army of 1 million men plus the 300 chariots. All Asah had was he had a good sized army, but they all carried shields and spears, and he had all bowmen. This guy had cavalry. This other guy, he had more than 1 million men playing cavalry. Footmen don't do so well against cavalry, do they? In any age. Yes, David.
It reminds me of a scripture, I think it was in Isaiah, I can't remember where it was, where it says, it was a prophecy, it says, before them it's lush green forest, and behind them is a desert and wasteland, meaning armies that come through. They basically ravage the entire land, taking wood and provisions and food and everything, to where everywhere they go becomes a wasteland. It reminds me of 1 million people going from place to place.
Joel speaks of an army like that.
Yeah, that's Joel. Yeah, that's the prophecy. But then, the counter to that is Yahweh's people, when they were traveling through the wilderness, was it like 600,000 men, not including children? They didn't ravage the land like that. So why was there a difference between the army just making desolate the places they went as opposed to Yahweh people is because Yahweh provided for them.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have to destroy in order to survive.
Well, what's an army there to do? They're there to fight, loot, and plunder, and destroy. Anyone else? Raquel?
Yeah. So, you read this already, you know, when Asa, I guess, put the seer in prison, what was clear to me is he lost the fear of Yah.
That is, now we're getting there.
Yeah, and I'll just read quickly Exodus 18:21. This is when, you know, Moses was going to pick elders to help him. It says here, moreover, you shall select from all the people able men, such as fear Elohim, men of truth, hating covetousness, and place such over them to be rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of fifties, and rulers of tens. So that is a requirement.
Yes.
And he lost that.
And he had lost all fear of Yahweh.
Yes.
That's what it seems to be pointing to and adding
Yeah.
up to. And remember, nowhere is it written in his account that he served and loved Yahweh with all his heart and all his soul. We read about that in David, don't we? We read about it in Josiah, don't we?
Yes.
We read about that in Hezekiah as well, don't we? We do. But we don't read that at all in this account about King Asa. Now, he takes the seer. So the seer delivers his message, the prophet delivers his message. Verse 10, and Asa was angry with the seer, and he put him in prison, and he wasn't raised with him because of it. And Asa pressed some of the people over this. Now, not only did he just take it out on the messenger, he took it out on the people. He took his anger out on the people. Who else did something like this? Anybody. But we're going to get to a point here of how far Asa has fallen. Anybody? Tom already know, you know, but go ahead.
Look, this aside, not aside, modern political comment. Just when the bulletin was going out that the one who called us in the past, the modern Jezebel, a bunch of deplorables that are what we might consider conservative or biblically oriented. Now it said that there ought to be a new mandate from our president currently to deprogram all of us.
Yeah, I saw glory with that.
Deprogram
Yeah.
to what affect our lives, nullify us so that we aren't even an issue anymore in the culture we're in the country, in the citizenry we hold, and just be negated altogether.
Let's turn a
There's
few.
nothing new under the sun, as Solomon said.
Okay, staying in 2 Chronicles, we're going to flip a few pages over to chapter 18. We're going to pick this up in verse 25. Yeah, we're going to remain in 2 Chronicles, go to chapter 18, we're going to pick it up in verse 25. This was when a prophet comes to visit Ahab and Jehoshaphat on the eve of the battle of Ramoth Gilead. And throughout all this passage in chapter 18, Jehoshaphat and Ahab are talking, and they go, and Jehoshaphat tentatively kind of agrees to Ahab's request. Isn't there a prophet of Yahweh we can seek here? Because all these other prophets, Ahab had all these other prophets saying, "Oh yeah, blessed O king, you're going to go whoop. You're just going to put the whoop on the king of Syria. Oh yeah, you'll take Ramoth Gilead, no problem. He's going to see you go running like a scared rabbit."
Hook 'em horns.
And yes, well, there's down here. Well, if you go down here, we got the original hook 'em horns. Where is that? Anyway, about this one fellow who made a helmet with a horn, he said, with these, O king, you're going to gore the king of Assyria, the original hook 'em horns. Tom, that was priceless.
I'm sorry, I couldn't resist.
Anyway, chapter 18, verse 25. And the king and the prophet been exchanging, the prophet Micaiah, been exchanging comments back and forth to each other. And the king of Israel said, take Micaiah and return him to Haman. Turn him on the governor of the city, and to Joash, the king's son, and say, thus says the king, put this fellow in prison, feed him with the bread of affliction and water of affliction, until I return in peace. What was part of the prophecy? What was it made him so mad? He wasn't going to take Ramoth Gilead, and he was going to die. He was going to die in this battle. Micaiah said, verse 27, if you ever return in peace, Yahweh has not spoken about me. Then take heed, all y'all take heed.
Hey, Curtis.
Yes, David.
It goes back to our study. He took offense of what he was told that Yahweh had predicted. If he would not have taken offense of what he said, he would have lived. But the fact that he took offense and went ahead and did what he wanted to do, he ended up dying.
Mm-hmm. He took offense of advice from the word of Yahweh. That's what sealed it for him. Anyone else? Anybody? Doesn't matter.
I told this brother earlier that maybe I shouldn't do this, but because it may sound a little flippant, but I mean well, I believe by this. Years ago when I would preside as a shepherd, ordained shepherd with weddings, was one couple I knew that the bridegroom had some real problems with looking to his own strength. And he started trembling as I laid hands on both of them, was praying for them during the wedding, and he started to collapse, and his wife propped him back up and said, please, brother, be strong. The lady said, I don't know what happened to me. He said, I had my own strength I couldn't hold up under what I was doing here when I wanted to be completely connected here in this sacred ceremony. And I said, perhaps that would be a lesson to always rely on his strength and not on your own strength. And I told him, I said, something which I think about quite often over the years after I left Sukkot, I think about it. It comes to mind by the Spirit, I think. The world champion king of the power serve, Rob Laver, the champion from down under from Australia, he had a very important saying. He said, the time, this is like Assad, the time when your game is ahead, never, ever let up. That's the time it's most vulnerable. It's when your game is ahead. Don't let up. And in my own life, I've caught myself being a little bit pleased with my behavior. Thanks be to Yahweh, I get conviction and or correction. To not let up and remember that's when at times I, as a believer, am more vulnerable. When I think my game is ahead and I've got the wrong state of mind at that point, like what happened tragically with Asa.
Just to add a little touch here. Okay, yes, go ahead.
I might keep going back to Jeremiah 10:23, where it says, it's not given a man who walks to direct his own steps.
Oh, that's right.
That is Yahweh.
That's it.
It's Yahweh who directs his steps. That's correct. Anyone else? Yes, go ahead. Feel free.
So something that keeps coming to my mind is that I'm seeing him, King Asa, in the eye, afflicted with arrogance. You get yourself into a place of complacency. And I mean, he's a king, so I mean, he's got a little bit of juice there, right?
Right.
But I think we can all be afflicted by it. We get complacent, we do the same thing over and over again, we feel good where we're at, you know, we got our gold star, Star of David, we got our zeets, we're in a good place, no problem, right? But we get ourselves in a place where we're arrogant and thinking that the strength that he has given us through this time belongs to us, and it didn't come from above, but somehow came from the wells of ourselves. And I think that Asa is dealing with a little bit of that affliction here. I mean, not only is he just like, cool, I'm king and I have all the power, but he's gotten settled in that idea. And he's taken it upon himself to look inwardly instead of outwardly toward Yahweh.
And that is spot on. Because with that thought in mind, can we turn to Daniel 4, please? We're going to turn to Daniel 4. I think most of y'all know where I'm going here. It's about Nebuchadnezzar's second dream. Now, this is right on line exactly what you just said. Let's pick it up in verse 28. He has this dream about this huge tree and how all the birds take refuge in it, and how beautiful it is, and so forth and so forth. Now, verse 28 of Daniel 4, and all this came upon Nebuchadnezzar. At the end of the 12 months, he was walking about the royal palace of Babylon. This is how he gets after following the warning from Daniel. The king spoke and said, "Is this not Babylon the Great, but that I have built for a royal dwelling by my power, for the honor of my own majesty?" Wow. Let's read this again. This is Babylon the Great. I have built for a royal dwelling by his own power, by my power, he says. For a royal dwelling by my mighty power. Wow. And for the honor of my own majesty. What pompous words. How more pompous can you get? Okay, Raquel?
Yeah. Proverbs 16:18, pride goes before destruction, and the Holy Spirit before a fall.
Okay, thank you for going to my next scripture, but I won't go there, so you get the
Oh,
That's
yeah.
all right. Yeah, look at the pride in
It's
that.
spirit thing, yeah.
Wow, the pride there is amazing. Now, so now we know what kind of complex he's got. He's got the same complex that had a grip on Nebuchadnezzar. Is starting to take hold real good on King Asa. Same one. This guy's going from bad to worse. So, like Tom pointed out, while he was at the top of his game, he didn't keep on proving himself or seeking Yahweh all the more. No, he let up. This seemed to set in. I mean, because wouldn't it be appropriate to be thinking things like that? He would get mad at a prophet of Yahweh to bring him a warning. Didn't I build this up? Didn't I defeat all the Ethiopians in the New Moon? Didn't I defeat King Baasha of Israel and all these other ones? Didn't that begin to set on him? After all, because he retook the rest of Judea. Didn't I take all of Judah? He got mad at the seer, and he did the same thing that King Ahab did with Micaiah. Now, I want to read just a little brief one of the credentials of King Ahab. Now, what are his credentials? Well, I want to read this very briefly out of 1 Kings 16. I'll pick it up verse 29. This is one of Ahab's key credentials here. In the 38th year of Messiah of Judah, Ahab, the son of Omri, became king over Israel. And Ahab, the son of Omri, reigned in Israel for 22 years. And now Ahab, the son of Omri, did evil in the sight of Yahweh, more than all who were before him. He was, up to his point, the most evil king in Israel. And we have a similar comment a few generations later about Manasseh when he first took the throne. But up to this point, Ahab was the most evil king in all of Israel. That's what's written right here. Ahab had done evil in the sight of Yahweh, and more than all those who were before him. Of course, he had an assistant, I believe, in all this. He seemed to have had the yes dear syndrome to an extreme when he hooked up with Jezebel. I think a lot of that may well have been his wife's bidding. Anyone have any question or comment? Anybody? Any question? Any comment? Well, we can see here. I found it interesting. I was discussing this briefly with a couple of folks here before we started here, and of all the good kings, all of us stumbled. They had their shortcomings, their flaws. They stumbled at one thing or the next. But from King Asa, we see a great start and just a complete fizz out altogether. But all the other great kings, it was recorded at least once in their accounts about how they loved to serve Yahweh with all their heart and all their mind. But that's not found written anywhere in either account of King Asa. He, like Tom said, he quit at the top of his game. Anyone else? Tom, did you have something? No. I thought I saw your hand go up in the
Well,
corner.
I had an auction.
I thought I saw your hand go up in the corner of my eye. I'm
That's why I
sorry.
was bidding. No. Not me.
Okay. Well, we can see what a great fall one can have even after such great triumphs. And after Yahweh can do all this, in spite of Yahweh, all it had done for him, we see his great downfall at the end. Because the conclusion of the matter is he never developed that full heart. We all read about the faults and shortcomings of all the other kings. And he made the same mistake as Ahab, the most. And that's a testament to how far he had fallen. Remember, Ahab was the most evil king in all of Israel. Not only did he throw the seer in prison, as recorded in 2 Chronicles 16, but he took it out on the people. He took it out under those under his reign. Now, I failed to find any detail about what exactly that meant. Because what it says here in verse 10. Well, Saul was very angry. Verse 10, chapter 16. 2 Chronicles. Then Saul was very angry with the seer, and he put him in a prison. And he was enraged at him because of this, the advice he received from the prophet, and Saul oppressed some of the people at that time. Now, I don't know what that could be. Now, we have the examples of Rehoboam and Jeroboam, with the king of the north, was it Jeroboam, the king of Israel in the north. How the people pleaded with him when he first took the throne. Please let up on these taxes. Let up on these burdens we've been suffering for the past several years. When they built up all the riches of Solomon and all the riches of the kingdom, what did he do? He ignored it. But nah. He said, no, my little finger's gonna be more weight on you than my daddy's thigh. But no, he taxed them and burdened them all the more. made all the moaning and the groaning. Because we were warned about what would happen to Israel if they took a king. He would take their sons and daughters, their bakers, his servants, his army, anything else he desired. Evidently that went from bad to worse. What I found interesting at the end of this count, go ahead to verse 14. After he died, they buried him in his own tomb, which they had made for him, which he had made for himself in the city of David, and they laid him in the bed, which was filled with spices and various ingredients, prepared a mixture of ointments, and made a very great burning for him. Well, okay, Raquel.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, I didn't wanna skip over, I mean, he had so much pride that even when he was diseased and his malady was so severe, as we talked about in verse 12, he did not seek Yah.
He didn't, even in his disease.
That's pride, you know?
Yes, it became, let's back up a little bit.
Yeah.
In verse 12, in the 39th year of his reign, Saul became diseased in his feet, and his malady was quite severe. Yet in his disease, he still did not seek Yahweh, but he sought the physicians. Well, yes.
I just see the contrast between him and the woman from Canaan who humbled herself and got rid of her pride.
Yeah. The parable that you're talking about.
Yeah.
The dog, yeah.
Maybe they got called a dog.
Mm-hmm.
She overlooked that because she was looking for healing. Total opposite. He needed healing, but refused to overlook any offense.
Yeah, David, they couldn't hear you, could you just speak up?
Yeah, they don't think,
Yeah, I talk softly, sorry. I was just saying that we have just a stark contrast to a lady that was not Israelite, and she did not take offense to what Yahshua was saying because she saw him for healing. But we have the king of Judah, and so much pride that he would not put that aside in order to be healed and seek Yahweh. And a lot of times in our lives, we feel like that we are too far gone to reach out to him and to seek him, even though we may have offended him or done wrong or done something evil. It's never too late. The only time it's too late for you to reach out to Yahweh is when you're dead. And then you can't reach out to him. But as long as you're breathing, no matter what you do, Scripture says he is merciful and he is forgiving. And he will have mercy on you if you turn towards him. Repent and don't turn away from him again. And he will forgive you and heal you.
Living dog is better.
like we hear.
Yeah, a living dog is better than a dead lion any day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Indeed.
While there's life, there's hope. I found it strange that they made a very great, at the end, that they made, well, first off, the address what Raquel said, yes, even his words, he came afflicted with disease, and he still would not see Yahweh about it. It was like nothing could, he reached the point of like nothing was turning him around. The rest with his fathers, and the closing of verse 14, they made a very great burning for him. I don't recall this being written by anyone. Did they wrap him up? Well, tell us how they wrapped him up with all fine linens and ointments and spices. And I guess it was, in part was, it could have been because on account of his disease, he kind of had his odoriferous thing to, yes, Steve.
I can't remember the Hebrew word for great burning. It can mean cremation.
Well, they cremated, undoubtedly, that's what they
But
did.
it was also a custom during those times when somebody of a hierarchy would pass away, that they would have a big fire of spices so that smoke would go up. So,
Okay.
yeah, I know what it says, but when you look at the meaning, they also use that word
Anyone else? Well, if not, we'll go ahead and close here then. And let's wrap up today's study on Messiah. Like I said, for those of y'all who were not here for the first part, he went really well for him because it was a parallel on how he was a type of Messiah. And he looked very good in that regard for a lot of places. But then again, it just goes to show the same guy can have that's not a guarantee of how he's going to finish, now is it? Hallelujah, praise God, and we'll close and have a closing prayer and
Thank you.
Hallelujah.